Hello everybody, video here for you today. This is the No Cap recap of History's Greatest Mysteries Season 5 Episode 9 called Who Killed King Tut? Originally aired June 10th, 2024. If you missed any of my recaps of The Curse of Oak Island, there's a link to the playlist in the upper right. King Tut is arguably the most famous Egyptian pharaoh or king due to his tomb being sealed and the most intact Egyptian tomb found when discovered. He died suddenly at the approximate age of 19 around 1324 BC. His name was wiped from temples and monuments across Egypt. Someone wanted him erased from history. His x-rays show bone fragments at the base of the skull indicating a strike to the back of his head, possibly meaning he was murdered. On November 4th, 1922, near Luxor, Egypt, in the Valley of the Kings, Howard Carter discovered King Tut's tomb after having pleaded with his sponsor, Lord Carnarvon, to pay for one more season of digging. Carter tried a place no one had looked before in the center of the valley, where either the original workers or later excavators had dumped spoils from another tomb. He found a rock-cut step. That stairway led to a door with a seal on it. The seal said Nep Eperu Re, which literally translates as Re is the Lord of Manifestations. Re, of course, is the sun god. It is the name Tut took for himself upon becoming pharaoh. Carter broke through the first door and reached another. According to his documentation, he made a small hole in the door, and with his flashlight he saw these objects, describing them as wonderful things. The tomb was almost completely intact, including the body of Tutankhamun, inside multiple shrines, and 3 nested coffins. This is the body with the famous death mask. At 9 years old, the then named Tutankhaten, meaning living image of the sun disk, became pharaoh after the death of his father Akhenaten, who had changed Egypt from believing in many gods to just one god, the Aten of the sun disk. It's very possible that Akhenaten was assassinated due to that controversial move. He was mostly erased from Egyptian history as well, and future kings lists would skip both Akhenaten and Tutankhamun, who changed his name early in his reign as polytheism returned. And Tutankhamun means living image of Amun, which is one of the other gods. Being 9 years old, he was likely just a figurehead as adults around him made the decisions. He married his half-sister Ankh-Isen-Amun and reigned for 10 years before his own sudden death. In the 1990s, Egyptologist Bob Breyer came across 1960s x-rays of Tut's skull and saw the skull fragments inside the skull. A head trauma surgeon colleague said it shows evidence of a blow to the back of the head. Bob Breyer thought that if King Tut was murdered, it would have been by someone in the royal court. Perhaps the most likely would be Tut's highest official that would become pharaoh after Tut's death, Ai. Ai had been in the royal bloodline for 3 generations and was the grandfather of Tut's wife. It was likely Ai's advice that all the old gods be brought back and the priesthood restored as it was before Tut's father changed everything. By the time Tut was 19, he and his wife had only 2 stillborn daughters, thus no heir. This was quite common with inbreeding. 2 mummified babies were also in the tomb of Tutankhamun with their father. If Tut did have an heir, Ai would never be pharaoh. Also, being almost 20 could have easily meant that Tutankhamun was having different ideas about how to run the country. One of the experts suggests that being close to Tut, it would have been easy for I to arrange the pharaoh's death. Second theory is that the head of the military killed King Tut. Horemheb was the army general appointed by Tut and would eventually end up succeeding I, who died after 4 years on the throne. Just like I tried to erase Akhenaten and Tutankhamun from history, Horemheb desecrated I's tomb and denounced his reign, and those future kings lists skip I as well. One of the experts suggests that Horemheb, who kept his job during I's reign, was perhaps the one in control of things all along. It is suggested that because I was the one who succeeded Tutankhamun, Horemheb and I made a deal that I would be pharaoh for a short time, and then Horemheb would succeed him. It also would have been easy for Horemheb to order a palace guard to assassinate Tut. Horemheb is thought to have reigned for as much as 25 years, giving him a lot of time to try to completely erase Akhenaten, Tutankhamun, and I from history. In any murder, the wife is often considered a suspect. Ankhesenamun's reason could also be trying to keep her high status. Tut's stillborn daughters, one at 7 months and the other at almost full term, are again referenced. After Tut's death, she sent a letter to the Hittite king asking for one of his many sons to marry her and become pharaoh. One of his sons is dispatched to Egypt but never arrives. I takes the throne and marries his granddaughter. Ankhesenamun also is mostly erased from history, but there is the Hittite documentation of the letter she sent, as well as many depictions of her in Tut's tomb and on the items in it. 2005, Tut's body is removed from his tomb in the Valley of the Kings and taken for a CT scan. When analyzed, the two skull fragments seen in 1968 were again seen, but there was no evidence of an external injury to the skull. They instead surmised that the fragments were a result of the mummification process, specifically when the brain is removed through the nose. There's also the possibility that the fragments were caused by rough handling by Howard Carter in the 1920s. It is documented that the head and death mask were stuck to the sarcophagus due to a pitch-like black mass formed from the oils that were poured over Tut's wrappings when he was embalmed. Carter first tried to put the sarcophagus in the sun, but that didn't melt it. He eventually used a hot knife to cut the head and death mask out of the sarcophagus. The medical team further discovers this femoral fracture that likely resulted in the bone poking through the skin. It happened shortly before his death because it shows no sign of healing. He could have died from infection or sepsis. Theory number 4, death by infection from a broken bone. All pharaohs supposedly participated in hunting expeditions and such, and so it is proposed that there was an accident during one of these dangerous outings. An example is hunting a hippo, which is depicted in this artifact from Tut's tomb. In 2013, a different medical team performed a virtual autopsy on Tutankhamun using the CT scans done 8 years prior. They concluded that he not only had the fractured femur, but also a smashed rib cage, a shattered pelvis, and likely internal bleeding all on one side of the body. They further stated that if it were an autopsy done today, they would suspect a car crash. Theory number 5, fatally injured in a chariot accident. The medical team ran a simulation of the injuries and determined that they are not from being thrown from a chariot, but more likely he was kneeling and then hit by one. In 2010, DNA tests were commissioned on 11 mummies with focus on the 18th dynasty, including King Tut, and it is found that Tut's mother was not Akhenaten's wife Nefertiti, but was Akhenaten's full sister instead. Theory number 6, death from inbreeding. It causes many gene problems and birth defects. Tut had a cleft palate, a curved spine, his upper vertebrae were fused, and he had a club foot. Medical professionals concluded that he had Freiberg's disease, which causes blood loss to the feet. That could have led to his club foot and the loss of his toes. There were many staffs and canes in Tut's tomb. Freiberg's is not fatal, but could lead to an infection in the joints of the foot, septic arthritis. Also in 2010, 2 German doctors proposed a different cause of Tut's bone damage. Theory number 7, sickle cell anemia, which would only make an infection from his broken femur much more life-threatening. DNA tests were inconclusive as far as confirming it. Theory number 8, death from malaria. Even today, 400,000 people a year die from malaria. It was prevalent in ancient Egypt. The DNA contained one of the deadliest strains of malaria. The show concludes with multiple experts saying the DNA results from a 3,000-year-old mummy can't be definitive. Lawrence Fishburne closes out the episode saying that perhaps future technology will be able to tell how Tutankhamun died. I'll be continuing to do retro no-cap recaps of Season 6 through 8 of The Curse of Oak Island during the summer and early fall. All of the other episodes are done and are in my Oak Island playlist. I'm also doing no-cap recaps of the current season of Secret of Skinwalker Ranch, which has its own playlist, and I'll eventually start doing retro recaps of that show as well. Thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment.